Good morning and welcome to the monthly webinar for LEA Special Education Points of Contact. My name is Annette Thacker-Bartlett. I am with the OSSE Division of Teaching and Learning, and I am joined today by colleagues from the Division of Data Assessment and Research, the Division of K-12 Systems and Supports, and the Division of Student Transportation. You will be hearing from some of them later in the webinar. You can download a copy of the slides using your handouts button in your menu bar from GoToWebinar. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted by the end of this week on the OSSE website. If you have questions today, please feel free to type your questions into the question chat box, and we will do our best to answer them as we go along. We have several OSSE staff behind the scenes assisting in answering questions today. First, I'm going to spend just a couple minutes with updates and reminders for extended school year, which is coming up this summer for many of you. Then I'm going to turn the time over to the transportation team to provide updates and reminders about what's going on in the world of transportation. Then we're going to dive into SEDS and talk about some of the tasks that you need to do in SEDS at the end of the school year that are sometimes forgotten, and just tips and reminders on how to take care of those odds and ends, as well as a few tips on overseeing related service provision as we approach the end of the school year. Then we will end the webinar with a few announcements about the DC Municipal Regulations, Chapter 30, as well as other reminders and announcements. Let's start with ESY. This is a reminder that you need to have your ESY calendars updated and accurate in 3 different data systems. Yes, putting them in 3 different data systems is a pain, and with the new systems coming out with transportation that will align more seamlessly, as well as eSchool Plus, we're working on streamlining that to be able to push the eSchool Plus calendar into SEDS. But for the moment, while those projects are still underway at OSSE, for the moment you need to make sure that the calendar is accurate in each of these data systems. You are the one responsible for updating the calendar in SEDS. I'm going to provide a couple screenshots in just a minute on how to do that. The eSchool Plus calendar, this would be the LEA data manager at your LEA. So if you would like to give them a gentle reminder to make sure that the ESY calendar is accurate, including start date, end date, and all holidays or non-school days during that time period, please give that nudge to the data manager. And it may be you or it may be someone else who is responsible for updating school calendars in TOTE for ESY. And we'll provide some tips and training, links to trainings coming up for you in just a minute if you would like more support with TOTE. So for the ESY calendar in SEDS, only you have access to this, to changing or modifying your LEA-wide calendar in SEDS. You are the LEA SPED POC, so only you have that ability. It cannot be done by other SEDS user types. To access the calendar, you just click the calendar icon, go to Edit School Years, scroll down to this school year, click the Edit button, and upon doing so, you should be able to put in the start date and the end date of your ESY period for this summer. Now, as a reminder, extended school year is not the same thing as summer school. If you have summer school going on, that's a different thing that you need to have, make sure those dates are set in your other registration systems. This is for ESY for students with disabilities, which may also coincide with your summer school. It's up to your school how you have that set up. In addition to putting the start and end date of ESY in your SEDS calendar, you also need to mark any non-school days. Otherwise, the calendar will default and just assume that all weekdays are school days. You have to go in and individually flag days that are holidays during that time period. And here is a screenshot to remind you of how you can edit that. You literally just click on the day on the calendar and a box pops up where you can edit it. So each day is editable in that calendar. And in addition to the calendar, you need to make sure that the reporting periods are correct. And so you can do that by clicking the Report Period button, which is in the last column on your calendar page. So there's should be 4 progress reporting periods during the school year, but there also should be a separate ESY progress reporting period. And it's important to get these dates right because that will coincide with the service delivery and coincide with the attendance and also other information captured for ESY attendance over in the SLED ESY module, and could affect payment for ESY at the end of the summer if something is not accurate here. So please double check in your SEDS calendar. You may have set this up back in August when you set up the entire school year. You may have already known your dates and put them in advance. So it's possible this has already been done, and I'm just asking you to double check everything. Here's a screenshot of what it will look like for you to update for the ESY progress reporting period. And this is a checklist for ESY. You've seen this checklist. This is the third month in a row now that we've shown you this ESY checklist. Again, it's just a reminder. The deadlines are coming up soon. That first Monday in May is the certification date for ESY. And so there's other things that need to be done leading up to that date. For example, in SEDS, you need to make sure all your students have the right status for ESY eligibility and for ESY transportation eligibility on their IEPs and SEDS. The last column here provides links to recordings of previous trainings or user guides that discuss these tasks more in depth. So I know we reviewed this in depth during the February webinar, so we will not spend extra time on this today. Just a gentle reminder that these deadlines are coming up. And here is the second half of the checklist. Some of these tasks may not be your task. They may belong to the LEA data manager. So a gentle reminder to them could be helpful. There's also a letter that will be going out to the heads of school, reminding the leader of each LEA all of the tasks that need to be done leading up to ESY. And that letter will include the same checklist. So your leadership will also be aware of all of these tasks that need to be done. And again, in the far right column are links to trainings where you can learn more about how to do each of these tasks. All right, now I'm going to turn the time over to Doug from our Department of Transportation to go through announcements and reminders for transportation.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank all our schools that participated in the first round of training yesterday and refreshers with TOTE, with entering calendars and transportation requests if you had any of that needs yesterday. So I want to give a shout out to Monument Academy, Mondo Verde, City Arts and Prep, and Murray McLeod Bethune PCS. So thank you all for attending. And we do have additional dates of training. There was a link already sent out. If you looked at the LEA, look for it.
The next slide will have the link as well.
Okay, cool. And also, we have another training tomorrow. If you're free to just drop past if you need any assistance. It's more so like a workshop, but we do have slides and everything that we do, we can go through. But it's more so one-on-one sessions if you need any help with submitting transportation requests.
And that's to use TOTE.
To TOTE, yeah, we use TOTE.
Help for using TOTE and submitting those requests.
So we are still currently in the process of working with the new system. Updates will be coming out sooner than later about, drop dead dates with using TOTE and moving towards the newer system. That will be at a later date. We'll send out that information. And also, we're currently internal right now, but we're also moving towards the box, which is a secure, safe place where we can do data transfer with students' information. So we're currently going through the process to see how we're going to roll that out to the schools and LEAs. And once we have that information, we'll definitely send that to Annette so we can send out to get all our schools and LEAs access to a box. I don't know if you want to echo anything on that, Wes. Are you good with that?
All right, I think Jackie's going to give us an update later in another session.
Okay, so that's the information moving forward that we have announcement with that. Far as spending school calendars and everything, just remember that for non-pubs, you are able to submit your calendars and your school year, your ESY 2018 and your school year 18-19 calendars, but make sure you please reach out to your DC DCPS liaison so they can help submit those transportation requests for you. during this process, because I know sometimes you all might not know who your liaison is at DCPS, so please reach out to them as well if you need any assistance with submitting your student transportation requests. Just remember that all LEAs in schools that will serve sites for ESY, make sure that you have calendars in the system, because without those calendars in the system, we won't be able to transport the students to your school. So please remember, if you're going to be an ESY site, your school is going to be ESY site, please make sure you submit a calendar in TOTE. Also, again, on this slide right here, we have all the deadline dates. ESY deadline is May the 7th, which is a Monday. We want to make sure that you have all your students that are eligible for transportation requests submitted. And we understand that you will have, it may change that some students that aren't deemed eligible for ESY may change. So just please, if you do have that change, get their transportation request in as soon as possible as well. And also school year 18-19, that deadline is June the 4th. So please adhere by these deadlines, because we want to adhere to these deadlines, because we want to make sure that we get a majority of these students transportation requests in, that help us out with knowing how many routes to expect for the upcoming year. And then also, we know that a lot of our teachers may go on vacation for the summer. So we just want to make sure, if you are going on vacation for the summer, just at least get a majority of your students in that you know for a fact that would need transportation for the next school year as well. So those are the two deadlines that we have to just make sure that we keep in our mind. May the 7th for ESY and June 4th for school year 18-19. And the training dates that are coming up, we have tomorrow, the 19th, here at 10:50 in the Bill 9 room on the 4th floor. Then we also have May the 3rd, May the 15th, the 31st, and also June the 28th. And we will also be at the LEA Summit, Starter School Summit, on June the 12th. So we'll be there as well, assisting schools that are need of submitting transportation requests. So we know that'll be after the deadlines, but we'll still be there clicking away. We're trying to get these student transportation requests submitted. And do remember, if you need any assistance with us, you can contact the TOTE support line at 202-576-5520, or send us an email at dot.data@dc.gov. So if you need any assistance with anything, just always reach out, and we're there for you. And we will have those dates in the Eventbrite as well. And I'll send out another blast to people that didn't attend the training yesterday and who are attending the training tomorrow. So just if you see another blast come from Doug Johnson, that'll be the link for the training dates as well. Okay? And also, just to make sure the checklists for transportation, everything for the new school year. These are the dates as well. That's down here again for transportation. And another stress I would like to do as well, just make sure before you submit transportation requests, if you can, reach out to the parent. We understand we do have a mobile population, so we want to make sure that their current address is still good for the summer as well, because a lot of they might have a date where they're moving in June or something to that extent. So we just want to make sure that all the dates and all their contact information is correct for the student. All right. Thank you so much. And that's all. Any questions? If there are any questions, just make sure. Okay.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, we do have one question that's come in about non-public schools and whether or not non-public schools should upload their own ESY and school year calendars into TOTE, or if the LEA representative should upload those into TOTE. So if you could clarify a little bit more about who does what, the non-public school versus the LEA rep for putting those calendars into TOTE.
So the non-pub, they are able to submit their own calendars in the system, but they aren't able to submit their transportation request. They need to reach out to DCPS in regards to who may be their liaison.
Okay.
I know it's a team there at DCPS, a non-pub team there, so they should be able to submit their transportation request. But long as the non-pub submitted their calendars for ESY and SY 18-19,
Okay.
they're able to submit the transportation.
Okay.
request.
So
And get them in as soon as possible.
soon as
Those
possible.
calendars.
Yes. Okay. So it sounds like the non-public schools have the ability to go into TOTE and upload the school year, the calendars for ESY and the school year, and then it's up to the LEAs to submit those individual student requests, those transportation request forms for the individual students, even for students that attend a non-public. The LEA needs to take care of those for the student level. Okay. So for all of you that are LEA special ed points of contact who have students attending non-public schools, right now is a very critical time for you to be connecting with those non-publics, making sure that the information for the student is accurate as you are submitting those requests into TOTE. Because the non-public may know better than you because they may have had more recent contact with the parent, like if the parent's moving to a new address or if their phone number has changed for the parent. So definitely be in touch with the non-publics as you are working on those transportation request forms for each student, in particular the students attending non-public. So it's a team effort there with the LEA special ed points of contact. And you as a SPED POC may be the person working directly with the non-publics, or maybe you've delegated that to somebody else. Maybe you have a different person who's the main TOTE person for your LEA, and maybe you've delegated to them to like work with the non-publics to get those submitted. But however you work it out, just make sure it gets done by the deadlines. Yep. Make sure that parent contact information and address is accurate, because we see on the back end our transportation team has every year have several delays in being able to provide transportation at the beginning of school or the beginning of ESY, simply because the phone number is wrong or the address is wrong, and it really makes it difficult to get that student to school on time when we don't have the accurate information. So anything you can do to move things along to get those transportation requests going would be awesome. All right.
One more question.
One more question. Let's see. That looks like that's it for the questions for transportation.
Okay, because I did say do it the next school year. Schools need to do anything.
Do any of
ESY work.
Oh, we do have a question about extended school years needing to do any of the ESY work. If you can just clarify, whoever typed that question, if you could just clarify that in the chat box, more specifically your question about ESY schools needing to do the ESY work. And it's possible that maybe they're talking about schools providing, maybe if ESY is at a different location, it's still up to the LEA where the student is enrolled to submit the transportation request, even if ESY is at a different location.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
In those cases, if the student is going to attending another school, that they'll be attending for ESY, that home school need to make sure that the ESY school has a calendar in the system. If they don't have a calendar in the system, then our routing team won't be able to have the correct information.
Yes.
So that's how we work off of calendars. We need the entry time and the dismissal time for schools, and that's how we base our routing. So that's important.
So the student level transportation request will indicate which site they'll be going to, and then separately that ESY site location needs to have their calendar uploaded into TOTE with the accurate details of start time, end time, and the dates.
Correct.
Great. And there's another question here about ESY, about whether it has to be 5 half days for all students, or can it be 2 to 3 half days, et cetera, et cetera. OSSE does not get into the details of exactly how many days and how long those days are for ESY. That can look different for each student depending on their needs. You can have different students on different ESY schedules, and you can have different schedules at different site locations. It's all very individualized based on what the student needs. And so OSSE does not need to weigh in on exactly the start time and end time, the half day, the full day, how many days per week. That is up to the LEA as they're developing their ESY programming and making sure that it fits the needs of each student. But great question. And as there's a question about funding for ESY, the teams here for the webinar today are not the ones that can weigh in on ESY funding. However, there is a contact person in that letter going to the leaders of each LEA about ESY. There's a contact person listed when there's ESY funding questions, or you can submit that question in the OSSE support tool, and that can be rerouted to somebody from the fiscal team that can answer your questions about ESY funding levels, because we do not have that expertise to answer funding questions about ESY here in the room today. And that letter to school leaders has not yet been sent out. It's in the works. I would think that's probably going out sometime this week or early next week. But the information in that letter is nothing new that you haven't already heard in these webinars, just about the responsibilities to provide ESY for students who are eligible for it, provide transportation for students who are eligible for it, and the dates and deadlines that you have already seen here in the ESY checklist. Great questions. All right, and now I'm going to move on and talk about wrapping up school year. I know there's still a few months left of the school year. Don't get too chunky for summer yet, but we want to help you prepare ahead of time to have a successful wrapping up of the school year when the time comes in June or whenever your year is ending. And in consulting with people here at OSSE, different teams, we have had a lot of feedback that one of the things that often gets neglected or done poorly at the end of the year is the progress reports, as well as the summary of performance reports. Progress reports are for all students who have IEPs. The summary of performance is for students who are graduating or aging out of special education services. And as well as we want to talk a little bit about students who are aging out and the steps you need to take in SEDS for that. So I am going to turn the time over to, I'm going to start talking about progress reports and then turn the time over to my colleague in a few minutes to help weigh in on that. So progress reports, as you know, are required. They're actually required under the IDEA, under the federal laws for special education. It is required that you provide a report on the progress a child is making towards meeting their annual goals. Now, how you deliver that information to the parent or student, and when you deliver that, it is very common practice to do that with the issuance of a report card, to kind of sync that up with the same time that you deliver report cards to share these progress reports. That's a best practice, and it's suggested in the law, but not required to be delivered with the report card. You can deliver it separately if you like, but it is a best practice to do that. Let me show you in SEDS how to generate those progress reports, and then I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague to talk a little bit more about the importance of progress reporting and some tips for And within SEDS, there is a progress reporting wizard. People that have access to this include related service providers, as well as case managers and others who need to help contribute to the progress report. Progress report is a group effort. It's a team effort. It's not just one person filling this out. Everyone who serves the student and works directly with the student, whether they're a related service provider or a teacher providing specialized instruction, should be weighing in on these progress reports. And there's a way for many people to contribute to a progress report before it's finalized. This screenshot is just a reminder of how you access the progress reporting tool in SEDS through that wizard. And when you are filling out the progress report, there's a place to include comments. And so we definitely encourage you to include comments. Don't just do the status of whether or not they're progressing, but include comments, because this goes out to the parent, and the parent has that legal right to know what the status is of their child in accordance to their IEP goals. And another tip, we often see that progress reports are finalized in the system before everybody has a chance to weigh in. So right now is the time to be working internally with your staff to set up a timeline of expectations of by when everyone's going to be putting their comments in, so that the case manager can finalize the progress reports in a timely manner. We often see reports finalized that don't have the input from everybody involved, and that should not be happening. I'm going to turn the time over to Victoria. She is a member of our Division of K-12 Systems and Supports, and I'll have Victoria introduce herself and then talk through the next few slides. Victoria, are you there?
Yes, hi, I'm Victoria Glick. I'm the State Complaints Manager here at OSSE, and I wanted to share with you all today some of the pitfalls that we see our LEAs experience in completing these progress reports that pop up in our state complaints office. My team investigates our formal complaints that come through the state complaints office, and we often see the progress reporting as a missed opportunity for LEAs to share information with families and communicate in a clear and data-driven way. So the big idea, best practices that I have here are develop a process for delivery and ensure completion before finalizing in SEDS. So develop a process for delivery. If it's your LEA's practice to deliver these quarterly progress reports with student report cards, then great. Then you're doing that in a way that the IDEA says, as Annette said, is the best practice. If you are not doing that, consider aligning your progress reporting with your report card so that you have a standardized process in place that families can expect to see at the same time as their students' grade reports. We find that this is a natural entry point for that information for families. Families very much connect grades to IEP progress, even though there are some questions about whether the two are linked. But families expect to see that information at the same time. We often find that families ask the question, if my student is failing or doing poorly in a class, what's going on with their IEP goals? So this is a natural time. So your first step in ensuring best practice in progress reporting is to determine if your LEA will deliver progress reports to parents with student report cards or in conjunction with another quarterly reporting event. So the key here for you to know is that if you decide not to provide this with a report card, you are still required to do so quarterly by the law. The second piece here is document your process. It's great if you know the process internally, but it's even better, especially from a compliance standpoint, if you're being investigated or you're involved in litigation or a parent's looking for information on what to expect down the road, it's important that you communicate when and how families will receive IEP progress reports in publicly available information, like your parent handbook or your special education handbook or policy. This would be a one-sentence addition to one of those documents. Should take care of it. And that'll keep you from having any systemic level violations of the progress reporting piece, and will also ensure that families are aware of what to expect. This is, again, I can't stress enough how important it is for families to know what's coming in terms of progress, because they otherwise only really see you once a year or at any other IEP team meeting that's called. So this is a gateway to ensuring greater communication. And then I just want to reiterate the best practice that Annette addressed before in the previous screenshot slides, and that's that you must ensure that all of the providers and teachers provide their comments before finalizing those progress reports and SEDS. This is key because otherwise, on the back end, you may be scrambling to collect various documents, emails, communications, meeting notes, and other things that confirm that that service provider or teacher's input was incorporated into the progress report as required. So a progress report isn't a complete progress report unless everyone with relevant goals has provided input. That's key to remember. So on our next slide, we have information on the specificity of the quarterly information you're providing. Specificity is key. So I ask that you always consider what kind of communication provides a parent with the full understanding of their student's progress towards meeting their annual goals. On the left-hand column under not specific, I have some examples of things that my state complaints team has seen in investigations on progress reports that were ultimately found to be inadequate. Student has not made any progress. Just the word progressing, or this goal has not been introduced. These things are maybe statements of facts, but they are not descriptors for families to understand what is going on. In that comment box on your progress report module in SEDS, there's a prompt there to provide additional information on the slide that Annette noted. we suggest that you specify the data you are relying on to assign the status of the goal. This is data-driven communication. The parent wants to know what you've been doing with their child, what the results were, and what's going to happen going forward. So we also suggest that you provide strategies that you've used or that will be used. And under the specific column on this chart on the right-hand side, I provide what I would call a stellar progress report description. You'll see the bolded points that information is included about the data used according to monthly classroom testing, meaning you don't have to reevaluate the kid, right? You're just using data. A lot of times in our investigations, when we speak with teachers in the classroom, they'll tell us, well, I based that information on the monthly or the weekly math test. And that's the kind of information that, had it been communicated to the parent, as simple as it may seem, would have resolved a lot of concerns. We also include in bold at the end of that paragraph under the column specific some information about what the school staff is going to be doing going forward, meaning what interventions they're going to be continuing to use, or what methods they're going to use in the classroom or in the pull-out services to continue to work towards this goal with the student. Here it says, side-by-side reading will be implemented to capture comprehension at intervals. So just as much information as possible. A lot of times we open up these progress reports and they're very empty. And I understand that time is critical, but the time you'll spend on the back end creating, pulling records and communicating with a family about what data was used to assign these statuses for these IEP goals can dig into your classroom time and your planning time for classroom staff and case management time for all special education points of contact. And so I believe that these best practices really are a way to communication skills with families that will avoid conflict and confusion in the future. So I think on the next slide, we have some information on summary of performance.
All right, thank you so much, Victoria, for weighing in on progress reports. That was very helpful to hear those tips. And we did have a few questions come in on progress reports. And so, Victoria, I'll let you weigh in if you want to, but some people are wondering if you have to use the form in SEDS or if you can use your own progress report form that you have come up with at your school.
Yeah, so you are not required to use the form in SEDS. We encourage you to, because it requires it contains all of the IDEA requirements for progress reporting. But if you have a different format that your school is comfortable with, that certainly can serve that purpose, as long as you make sure that all of those same fields are there on the form. When OSSE creates forms in SEDS, they go through a whole legal review, policy and legal review process to make sure that they are compliant with IDEA requirements, meaning they are compliant with current case law and guidance from the U.S. Department of Education and IDEA regulations. So just be careful to make sure that your forms contain all of the same information that a quarterly progress report in SEDS would.
And what you can do in the SEDS and online in the SEDS form in the comments section is you can just type a note to reference that you have this other document. So it's always helpful in the progress reporting in SEDS, in the comments, you can always say, like, see attached form or see Johnny's progress report, and you can just upload a copy into SEDS so that that documentation is there, that the progress report has been done. And then there's a question, someone has a question about what should you put, how should you elaborate on the status if the goal has not yet been introduced or addressed. There is that status category. So if a goal the progress report is reporting on how it's going with that goal. So if that goal has not yet been introduced or addressed, it would be helpful to provide a little more information in the comments box about why you haven't gotten to that goal yet. Maybe it's a brand new goal that you just finalized on the IEP 2 weeks ago, right at the end of the progress reporting period. You can make a note about that. The parent will probably want to know why you have not yet introduced a certain goal if that goal is part of a student's IEP. Victoria?
Yeah, and to add to that, Annette, we find in our investigations that not yet introduced information is a bit alarming to families. I think that sometimes families think that it's never going to be introduced. So if it's aligned specifically with a part of the curriculum that's going to come later in the next quarter, it's important to just say that, we'll be working on that skill in lesson such and such during quarter 2. And that, I think, is a clear communication to families about when they can expect to see information on that piece. I think it also conveys that there was some forethought in planning goals that would be carried throughout the entire school year, and that's really encouraging for families.
Great, thank you. Those are some great questions that came in the chat box on progress reports. Thank you for that, and thank you, Victoria, for weighing in. And we're going to move on to talk about summary of performance now. So the summary of performance is a piece of a student's post-secondary transition plan within the IEP process that only needs to be completed when a student is about to graduate or about to age out of receiving special education services. So this is not something that has to be done every year. And because it's not done every year, you're probably it's easy to get out of the habit of doing this and forget to do it. But what happens is if you don't close out this portion of a graduating student's IEP, then that student may remain on your caseload beyond graduation. And I know all of you can get frustrated by having students lingering on your caseload that have since left your school. Students no longer going to your school, yet why are they still showing up in your SEDS caseload? So this is one of the reasons why a student may not be properly exited from your SEDS caseload if you don't close them out after graduation or after aging out. So this is just a friendly reminder because now is the time. This should be completed in that 60-day window leading up to graduation for the student. This document is really important for the future. What you put into the summary of performance document, the student can take with them in their next step in life, whether it's going to vocational training or a college or a career program or anything. This document includes information that will be helpful to post-secondary institutions to know how to support your student with a disability. So it's a key document. If you want to get the student set on the right path, this is a helpful document. That's why it's part of that post-secondary transition plan. So you access it by going into the IEP process and clicking on post-secondary transition plan, scrolling down, and you will see the summary of performance page further down. And it has several different parts. There's 5 different parts. It covers assessments, student input, present levels, accommodations, and team recommendations. Again, this is all aimed towards pulling together critical information that the student can take with them to their next step after high school. The student input part is also important, that you get the student's input there, and it's crafted in SEDS to make it easy to do that. And so once you've gone through, and this can take some time, this is not something you can just sit down and do in a couple minutes. Like, this is something that you need to kind of plan out over time and make sure you calculate ahead of time to be able to get that student input, do the assessments if any additional assessments are needed. The present levels, you can indicate on the IEP that they're imported from the other place on the IEP, as well as the accommodations. So the present levels and accommodations can just be pulled from the current IEP if you've marked them as such in the IEP, marked that you want them to be pulled over to the summary of performance. And then the team recommendation will be thinking about the student in the future. That is a part that we also are asking you to be thoughtful about. And there is a place to upload supplemental information on the student. So be thinking about this in the mindset of what information would you want to provide to the next person who's working with this student, whether that's in a college setting or vocational training program, some kind of career preparation program, or an employer. What information would be helpful so that they will know how to support that student? There's more details about this in the SEDS Basic User Guide. I've included the page number down here if you want to read about it more, but I'll provide a couple overview reminders in this webinar today. It does need to be printed out and signed and then uploaded to the documentation page in SEDS. And again, not completing this process could cause the student to linger on your caseload beyond the date of their graduation. So please plan ahead to do this. And here's a little screenshot of the part of this document where the student acknowledges that they've been able to give their input. If the educational rights have not transferred to the student, if they are not an adult of the adult age or the rights have not transferred, then the parent will need to weigh in and sign here. Here are some guiding questions that can be helpful when you're thinking about how to fill out the summary of performance. Again, you're thinking about the student and setting them up for success in their future. Just talk about how the disability may affect their academic work and school activities. Talk about supports that have been tried that have been successful. Talk about accommodations that have been successful and ones that have not been successful, as well as strengths and needs that any employers or future educational institutions may need to be aware of to support that student. And again, you're filling this out and providing a copy to the student so that they can take it with them wherever they go. You're not responsible to send this to anybody. You are just responsible to fill it out and complete it and provide the student with a copy of it so that they can share it in the future. Now a note about aging out students. Students receiving special education services are eligible to continue receiving those services until they graduate with a regular diploma or until they age out of IDEA services. Aging out happens at the end of the semester in which they turn 22 years old. Now, when a student turns 22, they're not just going to magically disappear off of your caseload in SEDS. You do need to do a certain amount of documentation in SEDS that you have closed out this process. So there is an age out form in SEDS. This age out form, it serves as prior written notice to the parent and student. It just gives them a heads up like, hey, your student is about to age out and will no longer be eligible for receiving services. And it's a very big deal to end services for a student, and so this form does need to be signed by the head of school. Many of you have probably seen this form. It's been in SEDS for a long time. I generated a sample age out form and uploaded it to the handout section of this webinar. It's for a fake student, so none of the information is for a real student, so there's no data privacy issue there. It's a fake student, but it is a real letter from SEDS that looks just like what you would generate in SEDS to provide that notice to the student that they are about to age out. And here's a screenshot of that letter. It has standardized language that explains the IDEA law and talks about how the student is aging out, and it's signed by the head of school. You need to make sure that any students that are aging out have this documentation completed, that it's signed by your head of school and uploaded into SEDS, and that will help facilitate getting that student off of your SEDS caseload when the time comes for them to actually age out. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about wrapping up service delivery at the end of the school year. Again, we're not quite to the end yet, but now is the time to plan ahead and be aware of what's going on with service delivery. You don't want to end the school year only to realize after the students left for the summer that you have all of these services that need to be made up. So right now is the time to kind of plan ahead. If you do need to do makeup services, now is the time to plan for those. So I'm just going to remind you of a few tools that are available to help you as the LEA Special Ed POC in overseeing service delivery at your LEAs for all students at your LEAs who receive services. And that includes students who are attending non-public campuses who are enrolled with your LEA. You do have oversight of them as well. And it's important to be in regular communication with those non-public campuses serving those students to make sure that those services are being delivered. One thing we've noticed that has been happening recently is service providers will make a request, will complete a service log and finalize it, and there'll be an error, and so they need that service log to be deleted. They are able to make that request within SEDS for the service log to be deleted so that they can do a new one that's correct. And that request goes to you, but you may not be aware that this request is coming to you. Unfortunately, SEDS is not sophisticated enough to send you an email or give you a pop-up or anything for you to know that this request has been made. So what happens is these requests will be sitting in your SEDS account for a long time, maybe without you realizing it. So we do recommend that you train all of your service providers to notify you outside of the SEDS system, like send you an email or a text, or have some way to prompt you to go look and see that they've made this request. Or you can just, on a regular basis, just be in the habit of checking this part of SEDS to see if there's any outstanding requests. So here is a picture of how you get to that page in SEDS. Again, you as the LEA Special Ed POC are the only person who can delete a service log other than OSSE. Nobody else can do it, so it's up to you. And OSSE is not going to delete them either. Because we don't know the situation as well as you do with regards to why the service log was incorrect. So it is in your hands to take care of this. So please regularly check here under School System, go to Manage Service Logs, and you will see if there's any outstanding requests from service providers to have an incorrect service log deleted. And then you can choose whether or not it actually gets deleted. It depends on, it's a very case-by-case scenario whether or not you actually want to end up deleting it. Keep in mind that if a service log is from a very long time ago, many things may have happened since then, such as Medicaid payment and things like that. It could get more complicated if this service log is from a long time ago. So do your due diligence before you delete any service logs. Also, sometimes we find that people are not aware of when a service log is required. Obviously, when a service is delivered, you need to log that that service was delivered. But also, if a service was scheduled to occur but did not happen, there does need to be a log documenting that the service was supposed to happen but did not happen. And you should also log makeup sessions that happened. So we should see 3 different kinds of logs in the system. Logs for delivered service, logs for a missed service where it was scheduled to have occurred but was missed, and a log for makeup sessions. A missed service does not mean that you have to do a log for spring break, for example. You probably did not have services scheduled to occur over spring break because the school was closed down, so we would not expect to see a missed service log for that. Rather, it's like when the service was supposed to have happened during the regular school day, but then was not made up, then we would like to see a log for that. And then later, if it is made up, we'll see a log for that. And OSSE's data management policy does require that you log things in SEDS within 5 business days of them happening. And this is not just service logs. This is, for example, if you finalize an IEP, it needs to be logged. The IEP needs to be finalized in SEDS within 5 business days. If a service is delivered, you need to log that within 5 business days. That's just sort of standard across the board practice for how soon you need to have things documented in SEDS following the date of their occurrence. Service trackers are different than service logs. Service trackers are the PDF document that covers what a certain time period, and it captures and summarizes all of the service logs that took place during that time. OSSE requires that a service tracker is generated at least once a month. So many LEAs are in the habit of having their service providers generate these at the end of each month, generate a service tracker that shows services for that whole month. Other LEAs may require these to be generated more often, like weekly or bi-monthly. That is up to you as the LEA to decide how often the trackers are generated. OSSE just needs to see them at least once a month. And as a reminder, we do not require a physical signature on that tracker. Just the fact that the service provider is logged in to SEDS using their unique name and password, logged in and generated the PDF, to OSSE that constitutes an electronic signature that is sufficient. However, the LEA can require an actual physical signature and then have it be uploaded back into SEDS. That is up to the LEA. The exception is if there is an intern or an assistant who is not fully licensed, who is providing the service. If that intern or assistant is logging the service, they do need to have their trackers printed off and signed by the licensed supervisor and then uploaded back into SEDS. So that is the exception where we would need a physical signature. The Related Services Management Report is a report that can help you in your role in overseeing service provision across all of your campuses, including non-public campuses. So I just want to remind you briefly today of this as a tool in CLIC. You as the special ed point of contact, if you are the official LEA special ed point of contact, you should automatically have access to this app within CLIC. If you do not have access to this app within CLIC, but you believe that you should have access because you are the LEA SPED POC, please submit a ticket to the OSSE support tool and the OSSE team can look into why you're not able to access this app in CLIC. There's several different sheets within the Related Service Provider Management Report. Some sheets are more helpful than others depending on what you're looking for, but this tool is only as accurate as the service logs that feed into it. So if there are incorrect service logs, there's going to be incorrect service information in this report. Also, if there are missing service logs, then it will look like services are missing on this report. So it's only as accurate as the service logs that feed into it. But it can help you identify gaps. It has different views where you can see by type of service, the percent of productivity for the service provider for when they delivered or attempted to deliver, when they were available, but maybe the student didn't show up, versus when it was the provider's fault that the service was not delivered. So productivity speaks to service provider being available and ready to deliver or not. And again, that status is marked on the service log. This just pulls data from the service logs. Or you can look at the delivered versus prescribed for a student. The delivered services detail sheet can be a quick and easy way to see what's on a student's IEP without having to go log into SEDS and pull up each individual student's IEP. It pulls that information directly from the IEP and puts it on here so you can see it in the aggregate, or you can drill down to each student one at a time. Just allows you to play around and get different information without having to go dig around in SEDS. But again, this information is only as accurate as what was put into SEDS in the service logs and as prescribed on the IEP. The summary sheet can give a comprehensive overview, and you can filter this in many different ways. There's endless ways that you can play around with the RSMR in CLIC to help you get a snapshot of what's going on with service delivery. One thing it can do is help you identify quickly an error in a service log that may not have been previously identified. So for example, here is a screenshot of in the RSMR when a student has 2 logs for the same date listed here. It can help you identify, wait a minute, why does it say that the school was closed on the same day that a service was actually logged as a direct service? So that's a discrepancy where it can flag for you. Maybe you need to go back and look and see what's going on with the service logs in SEDS and see if a provider has done something crazy with the service log. It can also help, and so then this would prompt you to go back, and again, you go back to school system and go to manage service logs, and there you can see maybe there's a request that's been sitting there to delete the wrong service log that you didn't realize was there. If you don't see the request, then you should reach out to the provider to see what's going on with the crazy service logs. Also, we encourage you to routinely share the data with campus level staff. For example, maybe there's somebody at a non-public campus that is helping to oversee service provision at the non-public campus. You could filter this data, export it to us. Anything you see in this app, you can export to a spreadsheet and share with somebody else. We just caution you to always share this data in a secure method because it does contain very sensitive student data. And you should always destroy any copies of this data that are no longer needed. We don't want to have sensitive student data floating around out there. This screenshot here just reminds you of how you can take snapshots and export data from the RSMR. Now, the last couple minutes today, I just have a few reminders and announcements. We have a couple questions about the RSMR. As a reminder, the RSMR used to be available through SEDS, but a couple years ago that was sunsetted out of SEDS. It is only available through CLIC. And again, if you do not have access to this CLIC app, please submit a ticket in the OSSE support tool to get access, because you as the LEA Special Ed POC should be using RSMR and CLIC on a regular basis to see what's going on with service delivery. Now an update on Chapter 30 of the DC Municipal Regulations. As you know, some changes are being proposed. Here is an update on those changes. On Friday, April 6th, OSSE released a notice of proposed rulemaking, and we put it out there to the public, and we're doing Chapter 30 revisions in phases. So the first phase is going to be focused specifically on critical gaps that existed in the laws on special ed, and to clarify areas of past confusion. So this first set of updates is specifically focused on the things here on this page, with child find, initial evaluation referrals, reasonable efforts to obtain parental consent, specific things that you must do during the initial evaluation for children under the age of 6, certain responsibilities for ESY, and requirements that go with the documentation of prior written notice. So the first set of revisions, again, is focused on these topics only, and you do have the opportunity to weigh in. This should not be new to you. All of you were involved in a child find and initial evaluation mandatory training that took place back in February, where we went over in detail a lot of these changes that we expect to have happen. So this should not be new for you, but we do want to make you aware that now the public comment period is open. So it just started, and it ends on Monday, May 21st. Now is the time if you would like to submit public comments. Here's the information on how you can do that. You can email, you can hand deliver it, you can come to a public hearing and testify if you like. If you'd like to do that, here are the dates, and here is how you contact Christy Weaver-Harris if you would like to sign up to testify. We always encourage LEA special ed points of contact to weigh in, because you know very well firsthand from the field how the implementation of these laws looks in the school. And the last few reminders and announcements. We have the Start of School Summit coming up on June 12th. This is the second year in a row that we're offering this summit, and we have moved up the time of it this year to be June, so that you have additional time to prepare, so that you get that knowledge and those resources early on and have the rest of the summer to prepare for the start of school. We're really excited about this year's events. And the Start of School campaign overall, not just the summit, but the Start of School campaign overall, this year, Leadership OSSE have identified these as priority areas. Some of them are the same priority areas as last year, and some of them are different. Some of these have to do with your job directly more than others. Some of them are more for your English learner points of contact or your LEA data managers. But we just want to make you aware of the priorities. And of course, we want to encourage you to come to the summit on June 12th. There will be several breakout sessions during the day that will be relevant to your role as the LEA Special Ed POC. The full agenda has been posted, and registration is now open. So you can click the links in the PDF copy of your slides to be able to go there and register for this, or you can just check one of the emails that I send to you, because I love to spam you with email, that has the registration link as well. And we're out of time, so I'm not going to get into the details, but you can read more about the start of school and the priority initiatives here in the slides. Of course, it's always a priority for us to give you resources to prepare to serve students with disabilities, and in particular those that need transportation. And this year we also have a few extra resources for those young children transitioning from early intervention services over to special ed for the first time. Okay, and OSSE has a new website. It's been around for about a month now. Just want to let you know that we completely revamped how that website is organized and hope that you find it much more easy to navigate. And of course, remind you to always read the LEA Look Forward every Wednesday. If you are not subscribed, here is how you subscribe to that newsletter. Within that newsletter, there's always a section that announces professional development opportunities, which you can pass along to your staff, that some of these your staff may benefit from, and we have our Division of Teaching and Learning catalog as well. All right, folks, we are out of time. We'll stay on the line to continue to type answers in the question box to those of you that still have outstanding questions, and we will officially close out the webinar. Thank you for attending. We look forward to seeing you online next month for the last webinar of the school year. Hooray! And that webinar is going to focus on using the CLICK app, Early Access to Students with Disabilities, which was rolled out last year, and this year has a few enhancements to help make it even better for you to use to get information about students as you prepare to serve them, getting you that information before you're able to see them in SEDS. Great, thank you. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful month, and we'll see you next